everybody. TYR Wadapalooza 2024. Welcome to the PFAA panel. I have some very esteemed guests here that you probably know and recognize. And I want to start. We have the president of the PFAA, Dani Speegle. No, I'm just Brent Fikowski. A multi-year games athlete and Wadapalooza athlete, Dani Speegle. You have a few fans.
I do.
A few. And by the way, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Oh, we need to turn that on.
Yeah, Brent was like, don't
There.
turn it on, like, until you start talking.
Yeah.
And I knew I was going to forget.
And then you started talking,
Yeah.
and you're like, wow, it's really quiet up here. I can't hear myself. So happy birthday.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
30.
Yeah,
30's awesome.
29 plus 1.
Yeah, exactly. It's good.
Yeah.
On my left, we have the coach's side. We have Carolyn Lambray. Wait, did we turn it on?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay, this is how we talk in the. No, I'm just kidding. This is how we talk in the microphone. I got her, Jeff. I got her. We have John Singleton, coach of the program.
Hello.
And Mr. Justin Cotler, Underdog Athletics.
Hey, guys.
All right. So we'll start with kind of how the week went. You guys have already competed. Congratulations. Started the year on the podium.
Yeah.
Second place.
Thank you.
Awesome. And Dani, how'd the week go for you? Just out there?
Just out there.
Just having
We'll
fun, having a
say
good time?
We're just out there.
I love it. I love it. No, but you had some great finishes, great performances. So it was awesome to watch you out there.
Wadapalooza is always a fun weekend.
I haven't
It's really like no matter how you finish, like you're gonna have fun. So.
In my defense, I literally haven't been able to watch anything because I've been here with all you guys, hanging out.
Me
But
either. I haven't seen anything.
Haven't seen anything. No. And then coaches, a completely different level of stress. He's not competing today, or this
This is a great
weekend.
weekend
So
for
it's a
us.
great weekend. You guys are on
Meet and
vacation,
greet, meeting everybody is awesome.
and you guys. No, do you have somebody?
No, we've been very relaxed. Justin's been doing all the work.
Justin's doing all the work.
Yeah, so Ricky won.
Yes.
So that was awesome, and sorry, Brent.
I know one guy who's not so happy about that.
It
But,
wasn't personal.
Yeah, that wasn't personal, bro. Yeah, we have a ton of athletes competing, but that was obviously a great start to the weekend.
Awesome. So I'll kind of open it up, whoever wants to kind of jump in on this. But what so far in the weekend, I mean, obviously we're only halfway. We have 2 more days. But what is kind of your favorite part of the weekend so far? Me, it's the sunshine yesterday and not the rain. But, what's your favorite part of the weekend? And, is there anything stuck out to you or something about TYR Wadapalooza that just is why you guys come every single year? Kind of open it up to the floor.
I think it's kind of this. Like every single year at Wadapalooza, it's a really good chance to interact with a lot of the community and the fans and people that you just wouldn't be able to see otherwise. I think a lot of other competitions don't do a good enough job to allow the interaction between athlete and spectator, athlete and fan, and Wadapalooza always does such an amazing job. And I actually appreciate the interactions because you hear wonderful stories, you get to hear some of like the other side of the fence. Like we're always just competing and we're in comp mode, but it's really nice to hear that we've affected people's just daily lives. So I just love to be able to interact with people, and Wadapalooza always does a great job. So the community.
Yeah. I got a quick one. So working with the PFA and Wadapalooza and our partnership, the one area we didn't have any control over at all was programming, like the actual workouts. We talked a little bit about movement standards, but not knowing what the movements would be. And so seeing the workouts and how they played out, I think, they've done a good job so far. Obviously with the weather, that's kind of a tough situation. I think they handled it, as well as I've ever seen, I think. It's a tough situation to be in. But I think what was cool about some of the individual workouts is, I didn't leave really, really sore, but we were all still really challenged. Like, last night we had 54 toes to bar, which isn't really that many for us, but they were very hard toes to bar.
They were so hard.
They were so hard, right? And even, the other workout was going to have, 30 bar muscle ups, and those bar muscle ups, when we did them in training, were very hard bar muscle ups. So I think it's a cool a testament to you don't have to do 300 wall balls for them to be hard. You don't have to do 200 chest to bars for them to challenge the best. We still got challenged by, even some lighter loads with like even the kettlebells at the end. I heard people saying they're too light. And they weren't too light.
They were not too
They were not too light. They were plenty hard at the end, right? And so I think that was cool, and I'm happy. Everyone's going to have their opinion on programming, but I think as a whole they did a really good job. So
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that. It's really nice that this is the first year, because I've been at Wadapalooza several years in a row now, and it's always like there's weather delays and stuff. And it was so nice for them just to have a contingency plan. They're like, this is what we're doing no matter what, instead of getting delayed to where we're here till 10 o'clock at night. Like, I would always rather just like change stuff instead of just delay, because there's been so many years where they've delayed stuff where other community events and stuff got canceled, or other divisions had to cancel their workouts so like the elites could go, and that sucks. So this year is really nice that we got everything in regardless of weather. So I do want to piggyback off that it was handled very well this year.
One thing I did see, because we were stuck on here with the tent over us, and watching you guys do wall balls in the rain.
Blows.
I know when I get sweaty and the wall ball gets sweaty and it's hard to grab, but I imagine trying to throw a wall ball in the rain is not the funnest thing.
The pictures are awesome.
Oh, amazing pictures. Rain just coming off of you, spinning off the ball as you throw it. Coaches, we'll throw it over to this side.
Well, this is my hometown. I was born in Miami. I was raised in South Florida. So for me, this is always a blast to come to. I've been coming to Wadapalooza since the beginning, and so it's always a very special place for me.
I think going around to the competitions in the off season, you obviously have Rogue, Dubai, and everything has a very different feel. Like Dubai is very intimate in the sense there's you have no spectators. It's just the elite athletes. And I think one thing that's nice about Wadapalooza is, people are coming from Australia, people are coming from Europe, and it really is like a meeting point. I would say it's a bigger meeting point than even at the games. There's they call it a festival, and I think it really has that feel. They've managed to do that really well. So, it's nice to come here, enjoy, interact with people all in one place.
I'm going to piggyback on what Dani and Brent were saying. Like Dani was saying, like the ability to be able to interact with the crowd and give the athletes the opportunity to do that. For the sponsors, for the community, I think Wadapalooza does it really well. And in terms of programming, like when I looked at, even though Jeff wasn't competing, like when I looked at the programming, I was like, oh, like this feels challenging enough that it's like I'm going in, it's a fair fight, but the athletes aren't getting destroyed, or you're not worried for like your safety or like the rest of your season of like, oh, we want to do something that looks sexy or that looks extra hard. And it's like, no, just go faster. Like, that's CrossFit. Yeah. Like, just go faster. It's about work capacity. Like, show that, display that. We can talk about, like, would a 6 event been better than 5 or whatever. Like, we can always nitpick things, but I think it was a good test, and it was fair, and it was hard enough and challenging and fun for the athlete. And I think that's, we can compare it to the games, but for an off-season comp, I feel like now when we ask the question of, like, how many of these could athletes do? Well, if they're organized like this, I think it changes the answer a little bit.
And I know with the partnership that you guys have with TYR Wadapalooza, did that change anything as far as how you came in? I know you're always looking at competition and looking at things that can maybe be tweaked or changed or different. But did it change the fact that you guys are now partnered with them to be like, I want to look at it differently going into this competition than I would normally, just kind of as an outsider trying to make something happen for the PFAA?
No, I think for the past few years, as I'm competing, and definitely like last night, for example, I'll take notes. And I've been doing this for years. I'll sort of make a list of notes, and it's the long list of things I need to get better at and how things went and how I can improve. And then I kind of make a list of what went wrong from the competition side. And I do that, and and I've given that feedback to other events over the past few years, and I'm going to do it to Wadapalooza. And it's nice to know that the Wadapalooza team is very receptive to that and like really wants to know what I have to say, and we'll send out a survey to our athletes and what they have to say. And sometimes it kind of falls on deaf ears, but so no, it didn't really change anything for me going into it. A little more time spent on the computer, but leading up to, but didn't really change much. So.
All right. It's kind of open for anybody, because, being part of the PFAA, it kind of holds a little bit more responsibility of, like, looking at it and saying, okay, it's not just me I'm worried about. Now I'm worried about all the athletes and everybody competing. So I was wondering if that added any certain kind of pressure. Was there anything you learned this year with TYR Wadapalooza that maybe in past years is kind of a difference with you guys being involved?
Yeah, I'll mention something really quick. So we had a briefing on the lunge. So it was the kettlebell on the shoulder, kettlebell overhead. And during the briefing, the standard for the kettlebell on the shoulder, we felt like there was going to be a problem there. And you could tell by the questions being asked, they wanted, like when you do kettlebell sport, the front rack is very specific in that sport, and it's like on the chest, not resting on the delt. And they wanted us to do that. And we were asking a bunch of questions like, well, what does that functionally mean in the workout? So then afterwards, a few of the athletes talked, and then we sort of passed it on to the PFA liaison and said, hey, can you go talk to the event organizers and say we think it's going to go a lot better for everyone, athletes, judges, spectators, fairness, if they just say, put the kettlebell on your shoulder, put it on your back, put it on your delt. It's still going to be really hard. And then the judge just doesn't have to worry about it. They can just watch your feet, and they don't have to be watching like the position of your knuckles relative to your chin or something. And so that change was made pretty quickly. And at other competitions, we've kind of tried to broach that, and there's been this wall of like no, the standard's great. And then what happens is you go out there and half the field does it right, half the field does it wrong, and they don't get penalized, and then they're at an advantage, and then some judges are holding it, some don't know how to hold the standard, and it just causes frustration. And so the fact that we kind of had this line of communication where the athletes felt a certain way, they broached it to the athlete representative, and then we're like, well, see what happens. And then Wodapalooza's like, yeah, you know what, you're right, that's a good idea. So hopefully what we can do with like even the AFJ, which is the Association of Fitness Judges, is get this big list of 200, 300 movements and define what those standards are like well ahead of time. Yeah. So when we're doing, you're doing a devil's press, it's like these are the standards, and we know they work as well as any standard, and then that's just what's applied, and that conversation doesn't have to happen. But until then, the fact that conversation happened and change was made, I think just allowed for the finale to be better. So.
Yep.
I think... and we've seen it this year a few times, right, with inclement weather. And the fact that they had a plan was, really fantastic. And I think it's something, that we're all trying to do. And obviously, Brent is the head chef of this, and he does a wonderful job. But I think the fact that we were able to come here, they had a plan in place, whether you like the changes or not, is not really the deal. It's the fact that they had a plan in place. And I'm hoping that other competitions will not just make changes on the fly, but will have those contingency plans in place depending on what happens. And I think ultimately we want to see a fair competition, but we also want it to be a great experience for the athletes. And the less chaotic and the less stressful it is at the last moment for the athletes, it creates a much better experience. And so I want to commend them on having a contingency plan prior to and taking into account the inclement weather, because we've obviously seen that happen in this past year, and there hasn't been a contingency plan, and it was a bit of a shit show. So.
And I love that take, because also, as coaches, you're trying to, like you said, keep your athletes calm, keep them level. Meanwhile, you guys are probably in the background freaking out about certain things, but got to keep the cool composure and be like, okay, no, you got this. And then you turn around like, what is going on? Like, we need to fix this. So it's good to be able to have a sounding board, and it sounds like that's starting to develop more and more in making this, something that is going to branch out into other events. And that kind of segues into my next question is, are there other, what other events are you working with? What is the future of the PFAA? I mean, Tier Wodapalooza, to me, is the all-star game of CrossFit. Like, you've got the games, but this is like the party. This is, like you alluded to, you get to hang out. You get to go and do meet and greets, and it's a lot more laid back and chill. But are there other events on the radar and other things that you guys have in the works to kind of bring this to a professional level?
Yeah. I'm not gonna name the events yet, because like nothing's set in stone. But that's what we want to do, right? Is just help other competitions run the best events they can, and also create just better partnerships between the athletes and the events. And so that starts with movement standards and safety and fairness, because that's obviously benefiting athletes and it's benefiting the event. But even things like getting athletes kind of partnered in a business standpoint, from a promotional standpoint. Like, how can we leverage, the Instagrams of the athletes to make sure people know, buy your tickets, watch the live stream. I compete at 4 p.m. today, watch the live stream. And the sport can be kind of chaotic and hard to follow, and there's like a lot of different events around the world. So we can strengthen that sort of media aspect as well. Tell better cohesive stories to all the fans that want to know what's going on. I think that's like another big thing we can do with Wodapalooza next year. But other events in the coming 12 months. And yeah, just we started here with what we did, and I think some progress has been made, and then hopefully chip away at that next year with Wodapalooza and whatever other event we can partner with. Kind of like expand that 5-page document into 6 and 7, and yeah.
Hopefully what happened this weekend, like the things that you mentioned, it was still on schedule, even though there was delays, makes a better fan experience, right? The kettlebell standard, like I was looking at all the pictures this morning, like I feel like a fan again of the sport, like I just watched what was going on yesterday, and you look at the picture and the videos, everybody's kettlebell standard is relatively the same. It's on the shoulder. You can get that. There's not a sense of like, well, some people are here and some people are here. As a fan, it makes it so much easier and more enjoyable to watch and participate and understand. And this is, I think, if we can help other events do that, you're just getting more fans, right? And more fans. And we all need that. The organizers, the athletes, like as a sport, it's a great sport. We want to share it, but this will help other people come into the sport and like watch it and become fans.
Well, and the other thing, I kind of alluded to it off stage, is that I've judged competitions, and I've judged local competitions, I've judged larger competitions, and it's better for the judges if the standard is the same. It's not like, okay, well, it has to be here, like you were talking about having it on the chest, but then you as a judge, you look 2 lanes down and somebody has it up here, or somebody has it, and it's just different on each lane. And as a judge, as somebody who has judged, it's such a good feeling to know that, okay, like you said, you look down the lane, everything looks the same. And that should be the standard. It should be about the athletes performing at a high level as opposed to judges judging at the right level and bringing up the sport as a whole.
I want to add, if you also take a step back, is I remember the first time I ever got introduced to CrossFit and watched a CrossFit video. If you guys remember the first time you ever did that, or if you think about someone who has no idea about CrossFit and they just happen upon a live stream and you just are watching a CrossFit competition, you have no idea what's going on. You're like, what is this? And then on top of that, if everyone's doing different things, you're kind of immediately like, I don't want any part of this. So when it's at least cohesive, it even looks better from people who don't already know what's going on. So there's that as well. Because I remember watching my first CrossFit competition, I was like, I have no idea what I'm watching right now. And so it's nice when at least everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, I can have my friends watch with me and kind of understand. I watch hockey games with Jeff, and I barely understand what's happening, but I can kind of follow, right? Without knowing all the rules and all the penalties and whatever, you can
yeah, it would be it was like everyone was out there with sticks and one person had a pool noodle. You're like, why?
Yeah, exactly.
What's going on?
So I think this helps, even for people who are already fans, to bring more people. It's just like you said, it's more cohesive. It makes it easier to understand, and that's where the sport needs to go. When we talk about professionalizing, it's you want it to be as easy to understand for people that don't know anything about it. That's what professionals should look like. When we talk about virtuosity in CrossFit, right? It should look easy, even though it's not. And that's what I think professionalizing the sport, it should be easy for people to understand.
Yeah, the unknown and unknowable shouldn't be the watching experience. It should
Exactly.
Yes, okay, we have different, you don't know what the workout is going to be, but anybody can look at it and understand what is going on, and the athletes can understand what is going on. And that's a big thing, because like you said, looking at CrossFit, when I first got into CrossFit, I think I watched the documentary, and I cannot remember right off the top of my head the year, where they did the workout where they announced it on the floor, and literally they're all just doing push-ups in random areas on the floor. There's no lanes, no anything. You're like, it's just...
The chaos workout.
Yeah.
I was thinking it was literally called chaos, but it was still controlled chaos.
That was a different one.
You're thinking 2009,
yeah,
where it was over the wall and the toes. Yeah.
Yeah.
2008 maybe.
Oh, I wasn't around, and
I just want. but watching where the sport came from, huh?
They didn't have lanes at the time, right? There was no taped lanes, so one guy's push-upping at an angle, another one's 10 meters away. You just Dude.
One of them's doing it right by the wall, so he's got the shadow, so he's not burning his hands on the floor. Like
Smart.
like things like that. Like, but you look at it and you're like, these are just random people working out everywhere. It just looks like a group workout with a whole bunch of people watching, as opposed to
Just a
this
fitness
is a
class.
sport.
Yeah.
These people are racing. That guy's in first, or that girl's in first. You know, being able to kind of see and understand the sport. And I think that's going so much further. And I mean, you see the popularity. I mean, it's all around you. I mean, look around. There's people everywhere, from vendors that are in the space to vendors that are outside the space. I mean, we've got a Ninja Warrior course out front. We've got Olympic lifting over, at the front of the park. So it's really cool to see CrossFit bringing everything together, and you guys really making it into something that, is a career. And it is. I mean, the checks this year were a lot bigger than what they were, 5-10 years ago, and really making it something that you can actually, make a living at. So I'm excited about the future of the sport. But speaking of that, I wanted to just kind of talk about the evolution going forward. What do you see 1, 2, 5 years down the road for what this is going to look like with the PFAA, with the Judges Association? You gave me the acronym, the letters.
It's the AFJ.
AFJ.
Yeah.
With the PFAA, with the AFJ, what does that look like going forward for, competitions like this and other competitions? Not kind of open it up anywhere.
I think one thing that's important, I think it's really important to acknowledge like how far the sport has come. As you're saying, we've done a lot. Like the community has grown so much. The sport has professionalized. And I think the one question we ask is, okay, what are the next steps and how do we get there? And this is where all these conversations come from. Like we speak in the warm-up area. We've been speaking for years, about the problems that go on. And as Justin said, like Brent has done so much work behind the scenes to try and bring everyone together and look at these next steps. And I think there's quite a lot of agreement between us in terms of what those next steps are. And a lot of people who are here at this competition are involved and agreeing on that. And I think we've also got to see a lot from CrossFit side as well to kind of enter that conversation and to be able to go, okay, they're really the gateholders of the sport. And so it's like, can we have the conversation with them about how we make the sport better, how we can grow? Because ultimately, even though we may have an opinion on where we'd like to see the sport in 3 to 5 years, we're not able to steer the ship in that direction. So I think it's ultimately about opening the conversation with CrossFit and to be able to go like, okay guys, what is that direction and how can we help get there?
I definitely think that there are things that we should and could know that doesn't interfere with any of the unknown and unknowable. Like we know when the games are, we found out when the Open was like a month ago. Like when are the Open in 2025 and 2026? Like if we think of the next generation, like can we get a calendar out so we can all plan for athletes like more long term instead of pushing at the last minute or rushing athletes into doing things? Like there's a progression. We want to be able to train our athletes properly and give them the time. But if I don't know what schedule I'm on, like if you think of the 2019 to 2020 with all the sanctional, you just threw a monkey wrench as everybody's programming, right? Which is, it's fine. But at the same time, like, was that safe for the athletes? If all of a sudden I'm used to this training schedule for so many years and now I have to like do all of that, like, is that for the athlete's best interest? Like maybe for the sport, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, and then, the world happened. But things like that, like what's wrong with giving me dates so I can better prepare? What's wrong with giving me some sort of criterias of things that are repeatable that I can know, that I can plan on, that I think would make the sport better and safer for everybody and for everybody to plan? Like if I want to buy a plane ticket for the games in 2025 and block off my holiday vacation, like as a fan, why can't I know at the games in 2024 when the games 2025 and start making plans for that as a fan? Because like I'm all for the athletes, but the athletes need fans. Like as a sport, we all need fans. We all need people like you to come and show up. And we want the community to be involved. And it's like, it's not just for the athletes, it's for everybody so we can all work together. Like we need so much more cooperation for the vendors, for the sponsors, for the fans, for the athletes, for the coaches. We're all working together. We're all passionate about this. But it still all comes from CrossFit. Like, can we get a little bit more information? Can we work together? Like, we all want this to work. Like, we're not against anything. We all want it to work better.
And as we see competitions working, more organized, and the vendors and the athletes and all of it working get better, you're going to see people coming to more competitions, because I know on an athlete side, it's probably, frustrating when you go to a competition and things aren't going right and things aren't going well. But it's also frustrating for fans that come and watch and see the frustrations, or there's something wrong in with the vendors or this or that, where if competitions are more organized and running, similar to like how this is, it's just, I love coming here every year. If all those events can get on the same page, then in turn, more people start showing up to those events. Those events become more profitable because they are, making the money because they're doing the right things. But it starts at the product that we put out there, the product that is on the floor, which is what they're doing for you guys. Justin, you were reaching for the mic, so.
I think the biggest thing for me, and really ultimately the reason that I got into this, was to create opportunities for athletes. My giving away, I mean, I'm an old guy now at this point, but my first games, I coached an athlete in 2010. And it was the first year at the StubHub Center. And I can remember, when they unveiled Amanda in the tennis stadium, and I was sitting there with maybe like 200 other people, and we were watching. And to think about how far the sport has come since then is pretty amazing. But I think we're in a pivotal moment now where if we want to continue to professionalize this, then there are going to have to be some changes moving forward. There's going to have to be open lines of communication between, CrossFit and sport, and ultimately I think, we've had a lot of discussions, with Brent and obviously John and I and Caroline, et cetera. And, we have, obviously we want this thing to be massive. We want it to grow. We want these athletes to be able to have unbelievable opportunities. Obviously it's still in the incipient stages, but we want this to grow and grow and grow and grow and not plateau. And ultimately, I think that the things that we're working towards are ultimately with that end goal in mind, which is to professionalize this, to make this sport something that continues to be global and not just niche, and something that where these athletes continue to make more and more and more money, where we bring in more and more spectators and have more and more coaches who can make money, and then sponsors who can make money, etc. And it's this incredible revolving door, but it's all dependent on each other. It has to be synergistic.
I just wanted to add, the athletes have a wealth of information. When you guys are talking in the warm-up area, before, after, communicating, I don't compete. And as much as I program and I'm there and I observe, I do not have the knowledge that they have. And as much as I would want, let's say I'm starting my own competition, doing all of that, I would want to listen to the athletes. You guys have been doing it. You guys know. And when we're talking about this standard, I can think of every way, but am I really thinking about every way? Because you've done it way more times than I have, right? So it's why would you not want to have more communication? Why would you not want to listen to the athlete and have their expertise and their level of experience provide more insight into your organization? So I'm grateful that Wodapalooza was able to partner with the PFAA and have those open discussions, because nobody knows more than somebody that's actually doing it. I'm sorry, right? So if you're talking to an organizer, as much as you've been putting on the event, how many times have you gone through it? You guys have the experience of going through it. And I think that's important going forward, making sure that we recognize the knowledge, the experience, and the expertise that you have, and that you can contribute to make things better.
And obviously with kind of the bigger competitions like this one, Rogue, things like that, a lot of them are, of course, stateside. But John, I wanted to pitch it to you on this. How do you see the PFAA going forward as, not just here in the United States and Canada and North America, but actually going to an international and being able to spread out to, you alluded to Dubai, and me watching Dubai as a fan, not really understanding that, the athletes go there because, it's a great opportunity, but I look in the stands and I'm like, it's weird to me to see, them competing at such a high level and there be nobody in the stands. Or, what are some things that you think the PFAA can add to that internationally to kind of help other organizers, not just that are here, succeed and make this an international more so than it already is?
So it's a great question. I mean, we started years ago this kind of idea of Europe is coming, and it kind of became a bit of a tagline because a lot of the sport is very US-centric. And it's been quite an open discussion about how we can improve the season. And, there's big points like, TYR's never competed in Europe. And I think it's just that there's a certain structural component, and we start to move into some of the details that we discuss rather than the bigger picture. But it's like, okay, how can you implement a season where the best athletes are, say, going to the States, then they might all go to Europe, Dubai, and have this kind of season structure where the best athletes in the world are competing together in different places. I would argue that I think for us as fans, and I'm a big fan of the sport, if you look at the season, the games happen, and then nothing really happens much. It kind of dies off. Then you have this big spike moment. I mean, TYR versus Laura at Rogue. I mean, how exciting was that to watch? Then it kind of dies off a bit, and then Dubai, which didn't get much press this year. You've got Wadapalooza happening, but you don't really have many touch points through the year where we're getting much interaction in the sport if you compare it to so many other sports around the world. So I think there's a structural component to the season that needs to be improved, and I think that there's a world of opportunity that we could be utilizing that unfortunately we don't utilize, and it kind of comes down to the previous point that we don't hold the keys. We're not steering the ship. So it's like we're here, knocking on the door, being like, well, we're sending a postcard in, but it might not have much effect on that direction. And I think that's where that movement's coming. Is like, okay, here's some ideas. Maybe we can work together to help grow this for everyone.
And I think rising tides raise all ships. So as it grows here, obviously, we have the 2 semifinals in North America and only 1 in Europe, but we have so many European athletes, and like you see the levels, starting to kind of hopefully balance out there. But Brent, I wanted to kind of ask you, how does the PFAA blend into like the exhibition type events that come up, or has there been any talk as far as going into exhibition type things? The most recent one was FitFest in the UK, where they put together 6 teams. They did a draft. It was just fun. But has there been any talk, as far as not just having like an event that's like TYR Wadapalooza or Rogue, the big events, but like having an exhibition type thing?
Yeah, I think, and it kind of also answers a bit of the European question. I think what we want to do is provide like free resources that any competition can use. So if there's let's say it's just some small competition, and maybe it's in Europe and they're not as experienced, they haven't run an event like this, they don't have a games athlete liaisoning with them, and we've had some of those reach out to us, and we want to give them like, hey, here's a packet, like here's how to run a good competition, here's do's and don'ts. Ideally, like the AFJ keeps growing, the judges, and so it's like, hey, you can lean on them, and maybe there's some judges in your area that are certified, and they can be the head judges and help the volunteer judges. And if your judges aren't as good, here are some movements to avoid. Like don't do these movements; they're really hard to judge. Just leave those to the experienced judges. Now, as far as more, what was the word you used?
Like exhibition?
Exhibition events, yeah, like kind of all-star games, less like it's all on the line, 1v1 kind of stuff. Yeah, I think those opportunities are great. It's a question of where do you fit those into the season, because for the biggest athletes, a lot of them are going to Rogue and then maybe Dubai, and then they're going to Wadapalooza, and then they have to sort of book off their whole open quarter semis games 6 months of the year is, crunch time in a way, because you don't get a lot of those other opportunities if you don't make the games. It's hard to get invited and stuff. But I think hopefully FitFest, like I was there, we had a great time. Everyone was there that was there, like loved it and would recommend doing it again. So I think that does leave an opportunity for that. And I do like that, but I also want to make sure that we're prioritizing, focusing on like the thing, which is, one-on-one competition, or not one-on-one, but, individual competition and, elite teams, but like real competition and a real sport. And if we get too distracted by, we'll have like a fun thing and an activation and a photo shoot, and you do too much of that, it's like I tell people, sometimes I'm going to cool down for an event and they ask me for a photo and I say, I really have to cool down. And they're like, oh, but I really want a photo. And I'm like, the reason you like me is because I'm good. You know, like, and I'm good, and I need to cool down to stay good. Like, you don't care about what I have to say if I'm not winning, like, quite frankly. And so if we don't have a structure where athletes can be athletes and win and create a brand associated with them as an athlete, and if we get too distracted with, like, everything else and we don't focus on the foundation and the foundation starts to slip and we do, oh, but it's, you know, Brent, Tia, and Pat are doing a, you know, like, little song and dance, I think that's a problem. So I don't dislike those things. I think they're great. But if we spend too much of the PFA's time, and we don't have that much time to spend because there's not that many of us, if we spend too much time focusing on, like, I'll call it activations and all-star games and not on the meat of, like, how do we make a great season that can support, you know, twice as many athletes going pro and twice as many fans and get it on TV. Like, if we can solve those big questions, we're not going to have a problem with those other things.
Which is why I think the 2019 season was the best CrossFit season. I know that it wasn't done properly. I know that it threw a lot of wrenches into, like, a lot that was going on. But if you look at it from just getting eyes on athletes that were established, athletes who are trying to be established, just get sponsored, and brand opportunity. 2019 with the sanctionals, there were events going on all year. You could go to as many or as little as you wanted. You could do top 20 in the open and make it to games, or you could go to, like what I did, 10 different events and be like, I'm going to the games this year, even if I die doing it. And that was a year that was really pivotal for me because I was doing so much and I was, like, in everybody's eyes because I did every competition that I could. I was all over the world. And people started noticing me that year. And that's how I started building my brand. And I think if you look at that year, if it was run better, if it was done a little bit better, some things were taken away, if the PFAA was actually, like, active at that time, I think that year shows that when you have it going on continuously all year, that everyone is working together year-round to create a good season for the athletes, the brands, the coaches, everything. That's where it was, like, the most exciting year for everybody. And if we can get something like that, it makes it also a more professional sport. But when you're having something that is just a tiny little period of time where half of it is just at your own gym or online, and then you get maybe one opportunity to see athletes at semifinals, injury, bad weekend, then they don't go to games, that's it. There's no other opportunity to really see them if they don't continue to do these other events. But if you have a year-long event, then no matter what, injury, sickness, whatever, they have the whole year to continue to showcase who they are, who their brands are, who their community is, and that's where the professional side has to go. That's where we have to push. It has to become a bigger sport where it's not just reliant on whether you can do the open, quarterfinals, semifinals games.
And it's kind of like it would be a controlled chaos type situation of being able to know, okay, yeah, you can go to all these different events and have the opportunities. Like I did as a fan, thought it was exciting because you would see somebody that you wouldn't normally see over in Europe or in Australia or, you know, jumping around and doing that. But also you look at it and it's like, okay, so they qualified, but that person qualified through there and this person qualified that. So, okay, so I think the person like 13th.
But other sports like tennis, you know, they've proved
They have
that
a point
it
system.
works. Yeah.
Yeah. There's, like, again, I think there was pieces of that season of the 2019 year that worked, and certainly pieces that absolutely didn't
were
work.
not great.
But there's a pretty easy way that, you know, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, there's tons of other sports that have, you know, tier 1 events, tier 2 events, tier 3, tier 4 events. And, you know, you get more points depending on the tier, and then you have your, let's say I'm a tier 1 athlete, so I don't need to do the bottom tier events, and I get more points up here. And once I have more points, I keep that ranking, and I get an event for the games. And so, you know, there's like a minimum and a maximum threshold of events, let's say I'm allowed to go to, and maybe like a semifinal bubbles athlete, they're kind of competing in the tier 2 and 3, and their goal is to pop up into these events. And so it allows for opportunities. That's like a dream thing, but those events kind of already exist. You know, there's hundreds of events year round that are like this that are existing. You know, Madrid or whatever that are great events. And so it's like if we can find a way to kind of push them all together, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, but
real quick, I'm gonna jump in. I think Dani raises an incredible point. 2019 was the wild, wild west, but the cool thing about 2019 is, in my opinion, it kind of showed us what's you know, what we can do. I mean, ultimately, in the sense that we can create a sport that has a professional season where athletes can go to different events around the world and compete. And I think ultimately that will be the goal, is to create a season where you don't just have maybe one Super Bowl, or if it is the Super Bowl, that's fine. But, you know, you look at golf, you look at tennis, they have Grand Slam events, right? You look at F1, you look at, there are models out there that are very feasible ultimately for us to be able to work towards, which will offer, again, athletes opportunities. And that's what we want. We want to create a season, we want to create professionalism, and we want to create opportunities for athletes. And the way that it's set up right now, if we're being frank, is not the best way to create an opportunity for athletes. It just isn't. And so hopefully that's something that we can continue to revisit over the next few years and start to steer in a way that we can create more opportunities for athletes. I think that's ultimately what Dani was talking about. And I think we all will agree that that's the goal, is to create more opportunities for athletes.
And if we were to go off of that structure, I think having the PFAA and having more of an athlete voice, because like, I don't know, like you said, you did many, like how ragged were you? Like that was probably super hard on your body, and then you would have, you know, you made
I was
the games.
exhausted.
Exactly.
The games did not go well. That I was so tired.
But if you have the help of the PFA of like, okay, if all of these events, again, without controlling programming, but giving parameters of like you've mentioned, we had 5 events, it could be like 6, 7, whatever, we decide, but we know there's a certain limit of what you're going to be doing so that your hands are completely torn, right? That you're not doing 200 GZ sit-ups and getting, you guys are fit, you're not getting rhabdo, but like just overly sore and you can't perform to the level. Like, I think eventually, and this is why these conversations are important, like we need to ask questions, because I'm sure the sport in 20 years isn't going to be what it is right now, but what could it be? What should it be? Like we need to have those conversations now, and I think having the help of the PFA and all of you guys' expertise can help guide this season for future athlete and to something that is going to be enjoyable for everyone. Like we all want this. We all want better.
And so we don't have much time left. I do want to, if you guys are cool with it, open it up to the floor for a question. Does anyone have a question? Like sometimes, you know, we're giving so much information. I want to see if there's anything we didn't cover. And everybody's like, no, we don't. We're terrified. We're not going to ask a question. But I loved all the things. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, there's one thing I'd like to jump in on, and that is that, you know, on the surface of it, we're all competitors, right? But we've all come together to try and improve the sport. It's like, you know, like Justin and I, like we go behind the scenes, and ultimately, you know, we have competing businesses. However, one of the big things is that we all want to see the sport grow, and so we've all come together to see that. You know, despite these as competitors or whatever it may be as athletes, we all have this shared vision of seeing the sport grow, and the more people we can get behind that shared vision of everyone here, the further we can take that, and in essence, the more say of implementing these things we'll have.
Yeah, because I might not agree with having like a sanctional season or the structure that Justin would like to see or the structure that Brent would like to see, but having those conversations and bringing up those ideas is what is going to help move things forward, and you have to be able to listen to each other, and I think that's super important, and that's what we're trying to do, and hopefully get the fans involved and have your support, and so we can, you know, talk to CrossFit and talk to other organizers and keep making strides forward.
And the biggest thing, I think the biggest takeaway is just communication. It's communication between you guys talking as coaches, as athletes. Hey, like you said, I don't
have to agree.
I don't necessarily like this, but what about this? I like what you said, but maybe we could do this instead, and coming up with a system that is great for everyone. It may not have 9 out of 10 things. It may not have all 10 out of 10 that you like, but it has 9 out of 10. Yeah. And same for you. Like, it's that give and take, and the communication is key. And I think this is a great step in the right direction for making this a sport that everybody can enjoy, athletes, coaches, fans. And for me, I'm excited to see the future of the sport, and I think it's in good hands with you guys. So, yeah, I think you guys are doing a great job. Any closing thoughts that you want to give before we head out?
I'll say something quick too. I think lastly, you know, obviously all this has sort of been talking about athletes like Dani and I who are competing at the highest level, but you know, I also want to envision a world where, you know, I know athletes where I'm from that are just trying to make semis, and they don't have a lot of opportunities to compete. like most of their year is training in the gym, and they train for the Wadapalooza qualifier, and they train for quarterfinals. And they just hope that one of those two goes well, and they get to come and compete on this stage, or they get to go to semis and compete on that stage. And for them, that's their year, really. It's like training in the gym. And I would love to see a season that exists that's like, they can go on a website and they can see where they rank amongst intermediate athletes or whatever term you give them. Because that exists in golf, right? That exists in tennis and like a lot of other kind of individual sports. You can still have compete against people of the same skill level as yourself in like meaningful events that like have some notoriety, that have some prestige, and you can battle and maybe climb up, but also you don't have to. It's not just about like, let's find the next Mal O'Brien. It's like, it doesn't have to be that, right? It can be a sport where someone from the age of 19 to 29 competes every few weekends, has a lot of fun. I mean, I started this spending more than I made, and I was happy to do it because I just loved it. And I didn't think I'd make the games, but I just went to all these little competitions, and it'd be great if that existed, and I think that's also part of it. And if we kind of lead the way for the pros, hopefully there's a bit of a trickle down, and the quality of a competition like this improves, and then there's more competitions that can have intermediate athletes, RX athletes, community athletes, and there's like intentional events that have like a structure that leads up, and they all feel like they're part of it. And that's why the Open is so cool, because you get to see how close you are to Dani and myself. But online competitions are not as fun as competing in person. And so creating more live competition opportunities, not just for us, but for athletes of all levels, is like certainly part of the plan, which would be amazing, right? So that's kind of something I wanted to just mention at the end.
And in that, who doesn't like the story of the person that nobody knows who they are, and they come to a stage like this, they line up against you guys, and maybe they crack a home run out of it, and now they are, in the conversation, and now starting to make a name for themselves and be able to make a way in the sport as a professional because they had a great performance. Yeah, they didn't make the games, but they were able to come to a competition like this and be seen.
Well, athletes that Brent is talking about, it's also hard because a lot of those people aren't established enough to be able to go and talk to sponsors and be able to have an income to where they can then train at the level and the time that they need to be able to come and do Wadapalooza or something. So they're fighting against this like vicious cycle where they have to go and work a real job, they don't have enough time to train, and then they only have a certain little time frame and window to make it, and if they don't, well, they're like, well, I need to spend more time training, but I don't have that time because I have to go work this job. But if they go and talk to sponsors, they're like, well, you haven't done any competitions, so like we really don't, our eyes aren't on you. Like brands aren't going to see you, people aren't going to see you, so you're kind of like in our eyes not worth it. And so they're just like in this vicious cycle where they're like, well, they can't win. And so if we give them more opportunities, it'll click. It'll start clicking for them. They'll have more brands like start noticing them. They'll be able to get, little bits of income here and there. Maybe they don't have to work a full-time job and they can commit to it if this is what they want to do. But you need to give them more opportunities. No one's going to care if the only thing that they can do is the online qualifiers because no one watches them.
Maybe someday Pat will get to quit his job. Like, if you don't know, he's a doctor as well.
A chiropractor.
Yeah, he's a chiropractor.
He's not working 40 hours a week.
No.
Yeah. Let's be clear.
I mean, I had a full-time job. It was a flexible job, and I, made the games 3 times. So it's like, it is still possible, but it's just like more opportunities to compete against people of your caliber, and then those events that do exist, you want them to be good events. You want people to leave
in person
and be like, man, that was a great experience. Like, it was challenging. I battled with people at my skill level, ups, downs, but it wasn't like, oh, that judge was terrible, and that standard was terrible, and that felt unsafe, and they canceled workouts. And, like, you don't want people leaving events. And I heard stories like that from regionals years past, right? And you want to, like, eliminate those because people start leaving the sport as fans and as athletes when they're not having great opportunities. Because at the end of the day, like, 10 years from now, I'm going to have memories of competing. It's going to be like the memories and the relationships, and even at every level, that's what it's going to be. Like, that's all I remember from playing volleyball is like the friendships I made and the great moments on the court. So you need those moments, you need stages like this for those moments to occur.
Yeah. Well, we got to wrap because we got we're out of time. But thank you guys so much for coming on and doing this. This has been a great time, chatting with all of you. If you do want to go back and listen to this, please follow the TYR Wodapalooza podcast. You can follow it on all streaming platforms. It'll be posted there later on after this event is over. But you please go and follow and like. It's a newer podcast that we launched recently. Brent was on it just a few weeks ago. But thank you guys so much, and I hope that you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. And thank you guys for being here.